to start off with a little bit of a larger conversation around China. So, China, right now, that we know there are conversations about going to war. And I want to talk to you and what you think in your perspective. How close are we? And I'm going to use a Game of Thrones reference here, bending the knee to Beijing.
Um, the problem is when we get into a semi-political conversation, we are by necessity, we have to pick sides. And of course, when we do that, we're going to isolate other people in the conversation. But let me give you my perspective. And let me caveat, my perspective is simply my own. My view is not represented or representative of anybody else but me. I'm not speaking on behalf of the government. I'm not speaking on behalf of Chris and my colleagues or anybody like that. It's just Lou. I think we have been approaching foreign politics incorrectly for a very long time. When I say we, I mean the United States, but I also mean other countries as well. There seems to be this notion of zero-sum game, meaning if I take this from me, it comes from you, and you're going to lose something for me to gain, and vice versa. And so when you look at the Cold War and the way the United States was with then Soviet Union, it was an all or nothing chess match. And meaning if Russia gets cozy with this country, that means we're going to lose that country. And if we gain, through trade agreements, access to this country, Russia's going to lose that country. And so there was this, almost like tipping of the scale, who could leverage it enough where it was always in our favor. And that's true on both sides. And it's also true with China, and it's true with many countries around the world. I'm not sure it really is. Diplomacy I don't think it is a zero-sum game. I don't think someone has to lose in order for someone to win. The tensions right now with China are really, really high, and there's a lot at stake. Of course, Taiwan being one of them.
Right.
We are the way we left Afghanistan was not optimum, to say the least. We put not just our own people in danger. We really jeopardized the safety and well-being of a lot of people from a lot of different countries. And my big concern right now is, and I'll get to the China thing in a minute. We spent 2 decades trying to give women the rights that they need and deserve over there, and give them a voice. And now, as we left the way we did, that voice is being used to persecute them. Those who stood out for the last 10, 20 years to support the rights of women are now being targeted because they did that. And we haven't offered any assistance. We have an interpreter that had to find his own way back home after really giving much of his life to another country's cause. So China is not dumb. They see that. They see that sometimes in our country, politics will override good decision making. And again, I'm not being political here as far as what party I'm. I've always been apolitical. People assume I'm either a Republican, or some people assume I'm a Democrat. My politics are mine, and I don't force them down anybody's throat. I think China is very smart. China has been around. We've been around as a country, the United States, for 200 plus years. The longest standing republic right now in the world is the little country I just left, San Marino. It's about 500 some odd years old as a republic, maybe 6. China's been around for millennia, 2,000 years. And they don't easily forget about things. When they teach Chinese history in China, they're going back when Europe was living in the Dark Ages.
Right.
China was a very organized society. I'm not saying China is perfect by any means, but they've been around a long time. They've been around a lot longer than just about anybody else as a country and as a people. So they tend to play the long game. And they play when I've always made the assertion that when we're playing chess against Russia, we're playing checkers when they're playing 3-dimensional chess. And in fact, we're probably not even doing that. We're probably playing Connect 4 and they're playing 3-dimensional chess.
Right.
The Chinese are a little bit different. They don't even play the same game we play at all. They look at the world a little bit differently, and again, not bad or good, just differently. And we need to reconcile. They don't look at the world through the eyes of Western civilization. They look at through the eyes of the People's Republic of China. They've been through so much as a people that they've lasted. They've lasted a long time, and so we need to be understanding of that, and we need to understand that the history of China goes way back, and that the people have a strong connection to their homeland. And I don't think it's necessarily. Boy, I got to tell you, Chrissy, what a hell of a great question. We could go on. We could spend honestly 3 hours on this.
Yeah, and I wish, and I want to. I wish we could.
We're getting close to the needle, and one of two things is going to happen. China's going to take Taiwan.
What does that mean for Australia?
Well, let's start with what it means for us. Are we going to get involved or not?
Well,
we have the appetite for that, right? We just finished Iraq and Afghanistan after 20 years. Right. Do we have the energy? Do we have the resources? Our economy isn't great right now.
Well, and I was going to go into that. Like they're going to be the economical power of the world in 2030. Right now they have a UAP task force too.
Yeah.
They're researching UFOs just as much as we are.
Well, so what is that stuff too that's not public, that's really pretty advanced, and we've got a lot of catching up to do, and that's a problem.
Well, yeah. What does that mean to our national security? Like, is the Pentagon and any other officials having these conversations? And what are they saying? What are you hearing from them about them finding that technology?
Yeah, Chrissy,
and using it against us.
There are some that are having the conversation. The problem with our system, our political system here, is that you have politicians making decisions. I'm saying, again, this is, forget about Republican or Democrat or anything. Just the mere fact you have politicians who don't necessarily have experience in military tactics making military decisions. And for better or for worse, that's the system we have. The head of our Secretary of Defense and our Secretary of the Army and the Air Force and Services, they're all civilians. And we did that by design because we always wanted to avoid the temptation of any military officer getting so senior that they could take over the country, right? But the problem is that there's nothing wrong with the civilian leadership. The problem is when those civilian leaders don't have the proper experience and expertise to understand the nuances of geopolitical issues. A lot of these folks just don't have the requisite expertise. They don't have the education for it. They don't have the life experience for it. They don't have the professional experience for it. And so they're making decisions based on politics and not on national security. When I was at the Pentagon, I can't tell you how many 27-year-old kids would come in because dad happened to give $1 million to some campaign. Wow. And so now they're put on the presidential blue book, and they're a Schedule C appointee making decisions at the senior executive service level without any requisite experience and accountability. And once they're in and they leave and they're out, and okay, I did my job and I can go now, go work for some big lobbyist, I guess, or maybe law firm. But the damage is done. And for every year of damage that's done, it takes us 4 or 5 years to recover from that. And it becomes this vicious cycle. And it's a problem because we don't want to have the conversation. Right now, we are so enveloped in our own personal issues of what makes me feel good, what makes me feel bad, and you hurt my feelings, that we're losing sight picture of the bigger problem here. That's that at the end of the day, if we're not careful, it doesn't matter what the hell you think or feel or believe, it's going to be irrelevant because you're going to be told what to do by somebody else.
Right. And we're seeing that the vice president of Taiwan is looking to have this golden triangle of different countries, and Japan being one of them, to combat against China. So I'm going to go directly into the UFO conversation, though, is would we be sharing our information of what we understand about UAPs with that golden triangle of countries to be able to combat China? Because the scary part is that China, if they potentially have more information and research than we do on this, that again, it can be used against us. So would we be open to sharing that information with them that's classified to protect ourselves against that?
Absolutely love this question. And you know what, I without going into a lot of detail, I just had this with a very, very senior person 2 days ago, literally 2 days ago. And the question is, do we combat China, trying to us versus them, or is there another strategy? And I'll share with you, there may be an option C. It might not be an either or. And what do I mean by that? Well, what if we decided to take the advice of President Reagan at one point, way back when, said, if we were faced with the reality of an alien presence, alien invasion coming to Earth, would that not be enough for all of us to unite together,
right,
and put aside our petty differences? And I think at the time, most people agreed, yeah, that's probably would happen. What if we were to take the topic of UFOs, and rather than making a divisive issue where we're going to share it with this golden triangle, what if we reached out to China and Russia directly and said, look, guys, I know we don't agree on a lot of things, but why don't we pool our resources? Why don't we do something really bold and something really novel? And let's work together. Let's put up, I'm going to put $20 million. You, China, put up $20 million. Russia, you put up $20 million. Let's put some sensors up there. Let's open this data to the world. Let's make it, in fact, not even classified, but anybody and everybody have access to it, right? And let's work on this project together. Now, what does that do? It does one of a few things. First of all, it makes them co-investors into a project that we all own equally. Nobody can control the narrative, right? It democratizes this subject for around the world. It also does something else. Once they commit resources, now they're invested, right? It's a lot harder to piss off your friends that you're working on in something over here to go and invade something like Taiwan, especially when obviously the interest of Taiwan is semiconductors and their interests over there. It's monetary at the end of the day.
Right.
Well, what if you could make this even more lucrative than 1,000 times than what the semiconductor industry can do right now? And we say, look, this has a potential to advance our civilization thousands, maybe millions of years of human evolution in one generation. Would you want to be part of that? And maybe we use that approach, and then we don't have to worry about a Taiwan ever being invaded or us being involved or worrying about what Australia has to say, because it never happens, because we're all focused on a much bigger, more important issue. Maybe that's a solution.
Yeah. And I agree. Like, you have one of my questions here was talking about space administrations, because how they work together. They work really well together around the world, but then politically we see that countries that are at odds work together in the space. So in space administration. So maybe we take a cue from that and bring it into our politics as well, to say, hey,
we've done it before. We've done it before. We've had agreements with Russia over the North Pole, where we say, hey, look, Boris, if you see something you're not quite sure, if not sure it's us, you can give us a call. And oh, by the way, same thing, my good comrade John, if we see something coming over the North Pole, we're probably going to call you before we decide to press a button, because we want to make sure, there's a difference between real war and, me seeing something on my radar and not being quite sure. Right. And UFOs was part of that. One of the parts of the agreement was that, hey, look, UFOs are real. We could wind up seeing them on radar and confusing that as some sort of provocation by your side. We should probably have a direct line to each other just to make sure before either one of us gets a little bit too antsy and presses the button. There are precedences for those type of relationships existing, and there are areas of mutual and common areas, I think, that where we work together. Look, trade is a huge thing. China, the number one trading partner is us, right? We love the Chinese products, and they love to sell them to us, and we love to buy it. That relationship, they don't want to do anything to jeopardize that, right? And our ability to buy their products depends on a good economy. They don't want necessarily us to have a bad economy. They just want to have a better one than us, right? Because we buy their products, right? And so also we owe them a lot of money. And so they don't want us to default on that, right? I'm not saying, again, good or bad. I'm not supporting, defending, or going against. I'm just simply telling you what the facts are, right? So these are the realities. So China has to be very careful too. China knows that the U.S., if really, really, really gets provoked, they don't want that either. And I don't think we ever have to worry about an invasion, for example, of China. The last time anyone really seriously contemplated that was in World War II, and there was a very senior level meeting with the Japanese, and someone famously said, "I fear that behind every blade of grass there is a rifle." That has kept us to some degree here in the United States free of any type of really World III type invasion. Doesn't stop necessarily a nuclear strike, but there's other proxy ways to go after a country. There's economic warfare, for example, right? There's other asymmetric things you can do besides just invading a country. I don't think we have to worry about that. What we do have to worry about is a lot of our interests being impacted and affected. And worse, our word. We tell countries we're going to stand up and we're going to stick behind you. And then we do something like the way we did in Afghanistan. And it sent a very clear signal to the world. Right now, Taiwan is really nervous. They're like, whoa, wait a minute. We're just a few miles away from mainland China. And we've been talking a lot of rhetoric, talking a lot of smack, as we like to say, right? Because we had Big Brother standing behind us, but now we're not quite sure if Big Brother's really going to have our back, right? And that's a problem because it affects our credibility in the world. The reason why the dollar is the dollar is because people have faith and confidence in our country and our economy. But that's not guaranteed. That's not given. That's not fair. That has to be earned. And, every time we make a poor decision, that hurts us. That hurts our place in what we're trying to achieve. And also, I'll tell you too, we've done a lot of dumb things too as a country. I mean, we haven't always been very nice to our friends and neighbors. So that's also problematic. And this is where the world of diplomacy comes in. I can't remember the last time truly our country had a true diplomat. We had politicians, and a lot of times politics and diplomacy is the same act of doing the same thing, but for different reasons. Politics is usually doing something for self-gain, where diplomacy is doing something for mutual gain. So everybody, all ships rise with the tide, where
Right.
Politics is usually not that way. And unfortunately, we've had too many politicians and not enough diplomats, trying to work these issues for far too long. And I think that's part of the problem.
So we decide to work with China and say plan C, is something that we decide to go with. Are we going to adapt some of their, I would hope, some of their best practices? Because at this point, or I should ask you first, do we know of any other reporting that's come forward from China about UAPs? Because they have this wonderful measuring system that they're doing. That's a threat index. Are we looking at those as best practices and maybe including them in our own when we're doing our own research within the government? But then also, what does China know right now about UAPs that we might not know?
Well, we should be. I don't think we are as much as we should be, which for me is very disappointing. We've got a long way to go. For whatever reason, over the last 15 years, we have allowed some of our adversaries to gain a significant advantage over us. And you can get on any search engine and see that China is really has invested heavily. I remember a time when they launched successfully their first satellite, and it seemed, to me, I'm an old guy, so it seemed like yesterday, but it wasn't. Now they, are extremely prevalent up there, up in space. And, space is the next domain. That is, we can talk about the old days of having armies on the ground, and then we got enough developed where we put navies on ships on water, and then we got really developed and put airplanes in the sky. Well, the ultimate domain is space. That's it. He or she who controls space ultimately controls everything else. And the Chinese are doing very well in that area, and we're failing to invest in next generation technologies and bringing in bright young people. Instead, we're promoting, forgive me for saying this, but reality TV shows and Monday night sports instead of this topic, instead of trying to, we give sports scholarships. I guess my point is, Chrissy, our priorities are wrong. We have for many, many years placed priorities in the wrong areas, whether it's celebrities and musicians. Some of the richest people of the world are people who sing. Well, that's great. You're a good singer, but what are you contributing to society? What are you doing? Every time you get on the media, there's all these glamorous photos of these people when we got a serious problem on our hands.
Yeah.
We are a nation of ignorance. We're not having the conversation. We're just not having it. And, I part of that issue, I will tell you too, truth be told, it's a double-edged sword. For as wonderful as social media is and the wonderful things it can do, it can also be very, very destructive. And people out there's a lot of people that it becomes, it becomes the primary motivator for a lot of what they do. I have two young daughters, and I'll tell you, I saw it myself, and my daughters watch these YouTube videos of these self-help makeup and cosmetics people, and they would get so engrossed in it, they'd spend 5-6 hours on it every single day, and they'd have to go out and buy that next product. And I say, guys, you realize that's not beauty. Beauty's here. This is beauty. That's not beauty. That's cosmetics. That's an industry, and they're trying to sell you something, and it's working. You don't need to buy cosmetics to be beautiful. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's nice and lovely, but that shouldn't define who you are as a human being. This defines you. Your heart defines you. Everything else it's just a shell. And right. I think we've got a long way to go, Chrissy. The UAP topic is something for me very near and dear, but it's not the only thing. And I don't think it is and it shouldn't be for everybody else either. We have other issues we have to take care of, like you said, with China. Like I said, we need to arm our citizens with information, and then let the citizens decide what they want to do. That's a real democracy. But we have absconded so much, and we have forfeited so much of our rights and privileges out of whether it's sheer laziness or who the heck knows. We're allowing people to make decisions on our behalf that aren't qualified, nor do they have their best interests on our behalf. And somehow we're okay with that. Just, feed me more MTV and feed me more of what I want, give them circus and bread.
Are you seeing that globally as well, though?
Absolutely. Well, you know what? It's
not just North America. Yeah.
Not to the degree I see it here. There is an extreme amount of materialism here. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but we need to recognize it, and we need to tame it. We can't let it control us. And everything we do, I cannot believe the hypocrisy that exists right now. And it does impact the UFO topic too. But the hypocrisy that I see is far more insidious. I see the hypocrisy to the point where we don't even realize we're being hypocrites from every single one of our politicians, from every single one of our elected leaders. It's do as I say, not as I do. And that's a problem for me. I have a significant issue with that.
So I want to ask you this then, Lou. Where do you see yourself then? Because you're taking this to the UAP conversation internationally, and you've been traveling internationally talking about this. And, and we're saying, next year, starting now and longer, we'll probably have more of an international conversation around UFOs. So where do you see your place then on that global stage, in the future? God. Where would you like it to be?
The Lou answer?
Yeah, or both. I love both. Both. Where is it going to go? Where do you think it's going to go? And where do you see yourself in this? Yeah.
Well, where I would hope to see myself would be completely retired and no one ever knowing my name or who I was, and just disappearing into obscurity. I'm a very private person, despite being, public to some degree. That's not how I am. I've lived my entire life and career in the shadows. Right. I prefer my anonymity. In some cases in the past, my life depended on it in the jobs that I had. But that's me personally. My hope is that I can get this to a level where it has its own momentum and continues to build and get bigger and bigger and better. And, I've often said, I'm not qualified to take this effort over the finish line. I never was. I was never that guy. And I know people, kind of think I am. I'm going to keep running the marathon until someone picks up the baton, and I'm not going to quit a moment sooner. But I'm not the guy to win the race. I just started the race. And my hope is that we will continue to work together collectively as a team. People like you and your audience that are part of this effort, they're equally just as important as what I'm doing. The only difference is that I happen to have a camera in front of my face and they don't. But every time they get on Twitter, and every time they read an article, every time they write a letter to their representative or the elected official, or they have a conversation around the dinner table or the water cooler, they're making a difference. They're making a change. People are becoming aware of the reality of this topic. And that is important. I can't do that. I can get in front of a camera, and I can say a few words, and people might or might not listen. But it's it's the proverbial army that's behind us in this topic that's making a difference. That's why Congress is paying attention, not because Lou Elizondo said it. It's because their constituents are now saying it, because the media is saying it, because other individuals in the government are saying it, because people in other countries are saying it. That is the beauty. That's what I marvel at, that I can sit back and go, wow, unbelievable. I cannot believe the momentum this has on a topic that they tried to bury and crush and destroy for so many years.
Yeah. And I can even ask you then too, like there's so many people formerly that have worked in the government that have been helping to declassify UFOs and what's going on. Are you working with anybody now internally in the Pentagon about foreign relations? And if so, who?
Wow. Yes. I won't say who. It's not up to me. It's just like with the, recent book that Jim Lukatsky put out. I spent 4 years never mentioning his name because he told me not to, and I respected that. Yes, I am. We talked about this being for the first 3 years, 3.5 years. It's been mostly a defense and an intelligence conversation. But I'm not convinced that's where the conversation needs to stay. I've said before, for the record, especially this last year, the defense community and the intelligence community have a very specific purpose. Is something a threat? That's it. I don't want them involved in anything else that's not involved with that question. There are other organizations, the U.S. State Department, for example, could really help now this conversation, engaging the Foreign Relations Committee in Congress, saying, hey, we see the draft language. We need to work with foreign allies. What are you doing about it?
Nothing from Secretary of State. Nothing from
damn right. Yeah. And Congress, and the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate and the House, and they need to go and say, hey, State Department, you see this, you've seen the news. What are you doing about it? Because I want to know.
And nothing.
Don't tell me you're not doing anything. Yeah. Don't tell me you're not doing anything about it. I want to know, what are you doing about it, and who are you doing it with?
Exactly.
And where are we going? And that is where the conversation needs to go. That's part of phase 2, getting a much more comprehensive level of support and endorsement behind this. And they're interested. They are interested. It's just, we have to take incremental steps moving forward. And, my hope is that now we can engage folks like the United Nations and maybe NATO and some other international organizations and countries. I think there's a lot of value in that. I think there's a lot of goodness in that, because again, the two big things is no country should have to single-handedly shoulder the burden for this topic and have to pay for it, nor should any country control the narrative, because we've seen over the last 70 years what happens when a country controls the narrative. Well, not much gets done. So we need to democratize this conversation in a way that, because it affects everybody globally, why not bring the global community into the conversation?
And you're going to lead me right into the conversation about United Nations. Sure. ICER and all these other groups are coming together to talk about, having UAPs as a formal conversation with the United Nations. Where are we on that? And I believe San Marino plays a place in that as well. But can you talk to us about how close you are and how close we are to having the United Nations represent the UAP?
Yeah, topic? I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, there was an effort in 1978. Sponsored by Grenada. Right. Unfortunately, it didn't make it to the finish line, but it was a hell of a great start. Our intent is to learn lessons from both their successes and failures, and that's precisely what we want to do. And go to the United Nations and say, "Hey, this is your job, okay?" And lest we forget it, if you don't feel like doing your job, then we'll put somebody else there to do it. But that's your job, and the United Nations is there to represent the will and the interests of the world. And this is a topic that involves all of us. It's not difficult to create an international body. We've done it before for many other things, whether it's climate change or anything else. So why not do it for this topic? And the part of the justification is, look, do you really want Pakistan going to war with India because one of them happens to have a UAP over its nuclear site and it's confused as a provocation of war by the other side? Do you really want that? Because if you do, you're setting yourself up for exactly that scenario. So we should probably look at this collectively and start really trying to figure out what this is and what this means to our species.
Yeah. And this whole thing right now too about Robert Salas that is coming out currently in the news, and him holding a press conference on, I believe, this coming Tuesday. I'm going to ask you your thoughts on that too, because it totally goes into our national security. Did ATIP know during that time that this was going on? And
we
that the
did.
stories. Okay.
Yeah, we did, Christian. By the way, I got to tell you, this is one of the best interviews I've had in a long time. Really, really thoughtful questions. I want to just take just a second to thank you. I mean, honestly, I feel like I'm being interviewed either by CNN or something like that. I mean, really, super elevated questions. So
Thanks.
hats off to you. Yeah, ATIP was aware of the nuclear connection. We really owe a lot because there was a lot of information we didn't have access to, and it turned out that Robert Hastings did. He did a fantastic job in his one book about the nuclear connection, and we were able to validate and substantiate exactly what he was saying through intelligence reporting. So he was right. Not only was it good and accurate, but at the end of the day, it was helpful. In some cases, there was a little bit of information we didn't have that he did. And then in other cases, of course, we had some classified information he didn't have, but it helped us paint a little bit more, fill in the blanks, if you will, right? Think of a mosaic or a jigsaw puzzle. And his book definitely helped, place a couple pieces into the puzzle. Actually, because of him, I was able to interview some people that I didn't even know existed. And so it was very helpful.
Wow. Thank you for I wasn't sure if I was going to ask you that, but glad
Chrissy, you know the rule, man. You can ask me anything you want. There are no rules. You can ask me whatever you want.
It's one of my favorite things about you, Lou. And I love that you're an open.
Well, it's sure not my looks, is it?
Yeah, it is too.
This is as good as it gets.
Get out of here. So I want to ask you too, has any other foreign adversary contacted you about UAP issues at all?
I wouldn't be able to discuss that. It's a great question. But that gets into a little bit more of counterintelligence and security. And, if that were the case and then there would be an interest by the United States government to figure that out. So I don't want to, I don't necessarily want to do something that may interfere with somebody else's job. What I will say is there's definitely interest by foreign governments, particularly in some cases, foreign adversarial governments. But shouldn't be surprised. I mean, it's an important topic. And, a lot of these adversaries have known for a long time the topic is real. And just now the U.S. is kind of, coming to the game a little late. So they probably want to know what we really know, what our true intentions are, and all the good things that foreign intelligence services want to know.
And are you briefing other countries right now around the world? Because I can imagine that tons of people want to know this, and they have their own data, and their own governments have their own information, but they don't know what to do because they don't have the tech to analyze this or the ability to. Are you becoming that forefront with globally as someone that is going to be briefing countries around the world?
Chrissy, I would never want to talk about or reveal information about a third party without their consent. It's a bit like, when someone comes up and they say, did you have that conversation with Joe about, XYZ? Probably talk to Joe, because I don't want to, like, if you and I had a conversation about something, hypothetically, you and I were married and we had a conversation. Someone said, hey, did you talk to her about so-and-so? Did you tell Chrissy about this? And I would say, you know what, you need to talk to Chrissy about that because it's not my business I can't answer on her behalf. Now, if she gives me permission to, then absolutely we'll talk, but I'm not going to speak out of school simply out of respect. Foreign countries are no different than people, and some of them want their privacy. Some of them really don't care. It is a bit of a hot button topic. So right now, countries are coming out of the shadows little by little. Think of a groundhog or a prairie dog just poking its head out of the hole just a little bit, right, to kind of look around. Right. The last thing we want to do is scare it till it goes back in its hole for another 50 years. We want to encourage it and coax it out. No, it's okay. Come out to the sun. No one's going to hurt you. There's no animals with teeth out here. We're all friends. And so I guess I'm going to politely pass in a roundabout way on that conversation. But I suspect probably I think you probably know the answer to that.
I'll leave that be. The last thing I want to ask you too is your thoughts on, because you're known as a whistleblower, but whistleblower can mean many different things. What is your thought? And I've asked this to other people as well. What is your thought on the term and what it means to be a whistleblower?
Well,
And are you one? Because the one thing I'll say is that whistleblowers, I should actually ask you this. Do you think whistleblowers are positive?
I think the act of whistleblowing is absolutely positive if there's malfeasance. But how you do it is the important thing. It's not just blowing the whistle, but you want to blow the whistle in order to better the system. You do it because somewhere something is going wrong and you have to fix it. Let me give you an example. Toyota manufacturing. They had on their assembly line a red button that anybody on the assembly line had the power to push and stop the production. Now, keeping in mind, millions of dollars a minute are lost when you hit that button. And yet they enabled every single person on the line to hit that button when they needed to. Why? Because if there's a problem, they didn't want that problem to propagate and perpetuate over and over again into many, many cars and cause even a bigger loss, right? Now, until that red button was there, there were companies like here in America that would just let cars keep rolling off the assembly line. And they were junk, they were crap. And you'd have these recalls and in some cases, almost put companies into bankruptcy because they did not empower, they did not enable people to hit that red button. Now, what Toyota would not want you to do is hit that red button, take all the corporate secrets, and then give it to Honda as its competitor. That's not a whistleblower. That's a spy. That's not what you're supposed to do. A whistleblower hits that red button so the assembly line can be fixed and do the right thing. It does not give you carte blanche to just go out and give your adversaries information. So I've been very careful. That's why I don't talk about anything that's in my non-disclosure agreement. People say, "Oh, he's hiding behind his NDA." Yes, I do. That's right, because it means something. I took an oath. I'm sorry, that promise doesn't mean something to other people. You know what? Right. Obviously, they never served, but what it does to me, it's just like marriage. If I swear to you, hey, look, till death do us part. Guess what, baby? It's you and I are going to be buried together. I mean, that means something. That's what it. Yeah. That's what those words mean. And there are mechanisms to get around that. Like in a relationship, there's a divorce. If you both agree to have a divorce, and same thing with the government. I left the government because I had to divorce the government in order for me to have this conversation, to hit the red button. But that doesn't give me an ability to take all the corporate secrets of Toyota or the government, US government, and go give it to a foreign adversary. And I think a lot of times people think that's what whistleblowing is. No, it's not. Whistleblowing is having the internal fortitude and the authority and the ability and support to hit that red button. I don't know what I consider myself, Chrissy. I've been called a whistleblower, and by some people they say I am legally a whistleblower. Other people say I'm not. The term is good. I don't know if I fit that. I don't know if I want to be a whistleblower. What I want to be is I want to be a patriot. I want to do my job however I have to do it, I'll do it. Sometimes the truest form of patriotism, you have to do things that don't seem very patriotic sometimes. The true patriot is going to ask questions, hard questions, difficult questions, and that's okay. So like, again, you and I, let's say we had a relationship. If we really, really respect each other and trust each other, we're going to tell each other the truth because we want to help each other out. I'm not trying to tear you down. I'm not trying to belittle you. I'm not trying to put you beneath me. I'm trying to build you up, because in a relationship, I want you to be everything and every bit better than I am. So, but I have to be honest with you and you have to be honest with me. And that's the same thing with this discussion in the US government. I have to be honest. I've got to tell them what's wrong. I've got to tell them, look, the emperor's got no clothes on. And
you are that example, though. Do you think that more people within the government are going to follow your lead in the future and be this representative, because you are a representative in the UFO community in the voice.
Well, they are. You have people like Christopher Mellon who
Well, but more, right. Oh gosh, for sure them as well. But do you think in other topics outside of the UAP that people within government are looking at you as an example and going, you know what, this is something, and even maybe the government going, maybe this is something that we should do because we need to be transparent. And that's always the issue.
On the inside that have definitely picked up
saying this is a good way to go.
There's a coalition of the willing for sure right now. But I always have to be clear, Chrissy, this can't be a cult of personality thing. It can't be about me. It can't be my journey, right? It has to be about all of us. We all have to stand side by side. And people say, oh, Lou, you're leading the cause. Actually, I'm not really leading. When I look to my left and I look to my right, I see a whole army of people. We're all standing shoulder to shoulder, and we all have our different duties and responsibilities within the line, but none of us is more important or less important. And I think from my perspective, certainly only my perspective, I do think people in the government, there are some really, really good positive pockets that want to do the right thing. They really, really do agree that we need to have an open dialogue and that government needs to do its job in this topic. And so I will say this, a lot has happened in the last 3.5 years. It has been a seismic change every time I go to DC. I'm always I'm always a little paranoid, wondering, if someone's going to wrap me up and throw me in the back of a van. But I'm always surprised just how much people come up to me and say, Lou, we've been able to have this discussion. We don't have to whisper anymore in the Pentagon about UFOs. We can talk about it openly in the halls. And it's like, yeah, no kidding. Yeah, it's like totally normal now. And we have briefings and we have these dedicated spaces, virtual spaces for analysts to collaborate and talk about it and analyze video and pictures and reporting. And there's collection requirements. So the mechanism is beginning it's being built and is starting to run. And I think for me, that's very encouraging.
Yeah. And I said I had one more. Now I have my actual last question.
Sure. Let's see. I'm a Gemini. I like long walks on the
beach. Okay. Do you ever wonder, because we had the disinformation campaign, during the early 60s, do you ever wonder at home or anywhere by yourself if you are a pawn in something current?
I'm sorry, Chrissy, one more time. I apologize. I was being told about a time check. I apologize.
It's okay. I'm like, do you ever think that currently that you might be in a disinformation campaign, like you're a pawn in it? Do you ever?
Every day. Sure. Every day. Yeah. I got to make sure I'm getting fed.
How do you fact check that you're not?
Well, it's not as simple as just saying it's a fact check. You're always fact checking. You're always looking over the data. You're always looking at people and their intentions and why is this person coming to you, right? I've been in the government long enough to recognize when there's an information what we call IO, information operation occurring. This is not the case. You don't. If you're doing an information operation, if it's legal, then everybody in Congress is going to know because you have to report that, and the same when your leader. So the Director of National Intelligence, Director of CIA, the Secretary of Defense, and the members of the Senate and House are not going to. You're not. They can't be fooled. It's illegal. Now, if you're running a rogue operation, disinformation operation, sure, that can happen. And you're not supposed to, but you can lie to Congress and your leadership, but you're going to go to jail. Because you can't do that forever. The truth will come out. You will be not only fired, you will go to jail, and it's criminal. And I'll be the first one to, if I were to ever find that kind of malfeasance, I will get to the topmost of the highest hill and I scream it from the top of my lungs. No, I think there has been some disinformation in the past, but I also think that the UFO community is its worst enemy. They find a conspiracy behind every rock, and that's not helpful. It's really not. We need a fair, rational-minded conversation about this topic. And the last thing, somebody who's first coming into this community for the very first time, and they walk in and they see the absolute landmine of agendas and interpretations and narratives and emotions. I don't think that's helpful. We have all these little different encampments of, are you this kind of person? Do you follow that person? Do you follow this person? We shouldn't be really following anybody. We should be following all of us together. We are a community, And I think therein lies the strength, and therein lies our success and victory ultimately. I've had people come and say, yeah, I wanted to learn more, but I didn't know where to start. And all of a sudden, next thing I know, I got, people trying to charge me X amount of dollars to, go on a camping trip and see a bunch of lights in the sky.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, is that good or bad, Lou? Should I do it? And I said, well, it's your hard-earned money. You do whatever you want with it. I'm not going to tell you yes or no. My other concern is that people are trying to control the narrative and own the narrative and then profit from the narrative. I can't tell you how many people come to me and, will say, well, this person charged me this much. This person charged me that much. I've even been accused of it. And I'm like, look, I don't even charge. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never charged anybody for a penny for anything. If other people have, that's on them, but not me. Even with the Discovery Channel thing, after 2 years of filming, 7 months nonstop each season, I made enough money to buy a fancy lawnmower. Total. That's it. People think, oh, he made a great big amount of money. And no, he didn't. Actually, I lost money. I lived in a trailer. I mean, you talk to MJ Bananas, he'll tell you, I was digging my own septic tank. I gave up everything in the government, my 401k, everything, and lived in a trailer for 2 years with my 2 German Shepherds and digging my own septic tank, to do this. I didn't make money. I lost money, but I also believe in it. And I do it because I think it's the right thing to do. I think, that old CIA saying, and for the truth shall set you free. I do believe in that. I think the truth ultimately is something that is owed to everybody and, shouldn't be controlled by anybody.
I 100% agree, Lou. Thank you so much. And that's our time. And I just want to say
Chrissy,
thank
so
you.
thoughtful. Really, really, really. I really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. If I didn't have to jump out of this, man, I'd stay here for another couple hours. What a great conversation, man. I'll tell you, the Debrief is really lucky to have you.
Oh, thanks. Like it's been, I honestly, I appreciate that a lot. Like I love working with the guys. I'm mainly doing the PR, but been slowly like building the show out with them while doing like 50 other things.
Oh,
so.
You guys are great. You and Chrissy are phenomenal. I kind of wish we had you back in the early days, back when I first came out of the department. I love your energy and your enthusiasm, and your questions are always super, super insightful and very relevant and deep. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I always end with saying, thank you for being rebelliously curious with me.
You got it. Thank you for having me. Until our next discussion.
Watch more podcast clips now on our YouTube channel. Go to Livewire Podcast Clips and watch more great podcast videos just like this one.